Hello, I'm Eric Landrum from the Psych Sessions Network and also a Season 3 co host of Teaching Matters, along with co host Dr. Rob McIntarfer from Lincoln Public Schools in Lincoln, Nebraska. We're pleased to bring you this collection of 10 episodes recorded from September 2021 through April 2022. Two episodes in Season 3 featured guests. In Episode 4, we speak with Casey Swanson from Plymouth High School in Canton, Michigan. And in Episode 10, we speak with Ginger Wickline from Georgia Southern University in Statesboro, Georgia. As usual, a wide range of topics are discussed across these 10 episodes. Here is just a sample: research methods, student mental health, hypothesis testing, fictions teachers tell themselves, self care tips, assessment chat, rubrics, AP psychology, IB psychology, high school teachers making connections with college teachers, understanding graphs, accreditation, rather than doing more, purposely doing less, the subjectivity of grading, study skills advice, modality switching during the semester, adapting to natural disasters in one's life, using storytelling purposely as a teaching strategy, the professional demeanor at conferences, improv for teachers, why oh why extra credit, STP's This Is How I Teach blog, hearing the diverse voices of teachers of psychology, and so much more. Please enjoy Season 3 of Teaching Matters from Psych Sessions. Welcome back to another episode in Season 3. Rob and I don't normally do this, but we fantasized about episode titles before we hit record, and I'm just going to let this bleed over. It could be useful fictions and other stories we tell ourselves. Who knows if that'll be the episode title that we get to. So,
Yeah, useful fictions. I think that applies to a lot of different topics that maybe we could discuss in education.
yeah, that we have goals and desires, and we might achieve them, and oftentimes we don't, or maybe I think sometimes we think they're happening, but we don't actually measure them or try to assess them because they're
Yeah.
just too tough to figure out.
And sometimes even what we measure is sometimes a useful fiction, or at least a useful incomplete nonfiction. We know whenever we measure something, sometimes we're measuring exactly what we want to measure. Often we're measuring sort of what we want to measure. Sometimes we measure something that we know is wrong, but it's our only choice.
Yeah, isn't that weird that we just
Hmm.
keep doing it even though we know it's wrong?
Yeah.
Doesn't that get people into trouble in things like relationships or
Mhm.
balancing their checkbook or, making a commitment to a friend? I know this is wrong, but I'm doing it anyway.
Yeah. And we got bunch of legacy stuff going on in education too. Some things have just been measured so long that you're just going to keep measuring them, even though you're concerned about what that measurement means.
Well, we've got longitudinal data. We don't want to, we've been doing this for 50 years. We can't stop doing it in year 51.
Right.
Oh, heavens.
Maintaining the database becomes so useful that the fiction of what the database represents just gets perpetuated.
Yeah. And, I think we flipped the order, by the way, of what we were going to talk about, which is fine because we're seemingly in control. We do have these traditions, and I will tell you, Rob, that I'm part of the problem, meaning that I have to openly fight this urge of saying to my colleagues, "We've been doing it this way." When new ideas are presented, or a new approach to something, or an old idea is represented again, I sometimes have to bite my lip or shut my pie hole and just let it fly because it might be that time is now for it. And I don't I don't need to keep saying, "This is the beginning of my 30th year at Boise State." And that's just the old man.
Yeah, maybe it's just because we are the vintage that we are. I don't know, but I feel that sense too. Sometimes I get foolishly angry at new terms when I just think they're new for the sake of new, when they're just, I think this new term is really talking about something that another term covers almost exactly. And I have to bite my tongue like you do because someone's super excited about this new term and really wants to use this new terminology, and maybe it'll produce something great. And in that way, fantastic. The proof is in the pudding. But maybe it is just the old person in me. I don't want new terminology when old terminology was doing perfectly well.
Well, and I think Steve Chu's written about this. He's written about fads
Yeah.
and how there are fads. And, you know, it's philosophers before him have talked about there are very few new ideas anymore. I mean, the ideas that we have about flipped learning, for example, and, new technologies can go back to what the Kulicks and, what was it? Self-instruct I'm not gonna remember the acronym, instructional learning,
Mm,
self-paced learning,
mm.
back in the '60s and, Kulik and those types of studies. So instructionalized I'm not getting the term exactly right.
There's the Skinner book, Technologies for Teaching, right? And didn't he was so good with plywood. Didn't he build a little technology for teaching plywood box that would allow students to scroll through and move a lever to one answer or another?
Oh, yeah, and there were metal versions of that built by the Lafayette Instrument Company
Huh.
that I saw as an undergraduate at
Wow.
Monmouth College. I mean, and those got turned into computer programs and statistiscopes, which
Mhm.
took up an entire room. I mean, here now we're going old school with,
Right.
punch cards with
Yeah.
SPSS code and JCL, job control language and all that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's probably what what are the new versions of underlying old ideas? I
Yeah.
mean, I'm not so sure, you know, if it's a really new idea or if it's just a new incarnation with a new coat of paint and a new box that's been put in. It's an app now rather than flashcards. It's a flashcard
Right.
app.
Right.
Yeah.
And I've gotta caution myself to not rush to judgment on that sort of thing because I think sometimes it's just my lack of depth of knowledge of a subject. Case in point, when I was going back, and I know I've talked about this before, but the Psych Sessions interview with Albert Bandura, and as I heard him talk about self-efficacy and self-efficacy research and the fight for self-efficacy research that he went through, and how he was bucking trends to actually get people to pay attention to that, I realized that what I know of self-efficacy research and what I know of Carol Dweck's mindset research, in my brain, they sure do overlap. Now, somebody with a greater depth of knowledge than me about self-efficacy research and mindset research might know a super important distinction, but my brain doesn't have that distinction. I think in my head, I think the constructs are the same.
And He all right, so let's take that. Let's say that you're and by the way, I don't know enough about them either to say if you're right or wrong, or if there are probably subtle nuances. And if we had, Albert Bandura and Carol Dweck to discuss that together, first off, how cool would that be?
It'd be a pretty amazing podcast episode, Eric.
Yeah, but even if we had their I don't know, their progeny, their
Mhm.
academic progeny to have that discussion, even in this academic setting, if we're getting it wrong or we're getting it slightly wrong, there's not a lot of risk. Even
Right.
if we're teaching it wrong,
Mhm.
um, if a student is not getting those definitions quite right as they go on into their future, there's not a bunch of harm there because students in their careers, whether they're going to grad school or, good job into the psychology workforce, their success is not gonna be based on being able to regurgitate the correct definition of either one of those terms. So, I don't think there's a lot of risk in that, um, and that will be a subtle nuance. Now, if you're gonna go into grad school and do a deep dive into it for dissertation, you'd figure it out eventually by applying it
Sure.
over and over. So, I it's that kind of thing where I think really good conscientious teachers like you would worry about that and you would take a deep dive. But I think in reality, as a novice teacher, I remember figuring out my mistakes.
Mhm.
I remember misteaching and figuring out after the semester was over, "Oh my god, I taught that wrong.
Oh,
I had the wrong definition,
oh, yeah.
and then I tested on the wrong definition,
Yeah,
so I reinforced it. And, the first couple of years of teaching after I got my PhD, and I couldn't go back and undo it, my students were gone.
yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. I think it is super low risk. The one possible downside might be as someone tries to do research on, let's say, a person's looking for literature about mindset and is going to write a lit review and is going to use that as a jumping off point for something else. Before that realization about self efficacy, if I was looking for literature on mindset, I'm looking for literature on mindset, and I might not think to include self efficacy in part of the search. But including self efficacy in part of the search can help a person think about both mindset and self efficacy differently, and they might write a different paper.
Yeah, but a good search on mindset and growth mindset, if you're doing a good search on that and getting enough articles, if they really are related, somebody in their introduction section in a
Yeah.
mindset article is gonna have a Bandura reference.
Yeah. True.
In fact, is the more closely allied those concepts are, the more often those are authors are gonna have Bandura references
Okay.
or other references to self-efficacy in those articles
Yeah.
would be my gentle counter argument.
That makes sense.
I don't think you would have to have it in, like, your psych info search necessarily, to make sure you capture it.
That makes sense. And I guess the bigger or meta issue is who decides what terms. I don't mean who decides. The process of how new terms get introduced into different areas of our field, I think might have implications for how people get to do their work. So if I think I've got a new idea and a new idea is coming out of my research and I'm coining a new term, is it really new? How new is it? And how does the field decide that? Because I think that does have implications. Basically, what terms end up being used is important.
I think, well, absolutely, terminology is important. I mean, we haggle and academically fight over terms a lot because operational definitions matter. And
Yeah.
so when we change from multiple personality disorder to, bipolar disorder, I mean, manic depressive, I mean, so the terms matter, the definitions matter, and, even things like calling psychological science a STEM
Mhm.
and, psychology versus psychological science, and
Mhm.
making the point that psychology is a science. I mean,
Mhm.
even those subtle little things that maybe you and I think automatically, but, when we call psychological science a science, part of that's because we believe it is because we follow the scientific method to invent new information, but also it's kind of easier to get grants from the National Science Foundation
Mhm.
when we're subsumed in a scientific discipline. So
Yeah.
those terms, they're we're not just splitting hairs for the fun of an academic argument. Where we're placed matters. There are STEM-based scholarships, which is why you wanna make sure your psychology department at a college or university is classified as a STEM department.
Mhm. Yeah, so at the large scale, it absolutely matters, and then I bet this happens in college intro psych classes as well, but I know in high school psych classes, when students are first learning terms, sometimes they absolutely overgeneralize. So they'll learn a term and they'll try to apply it to everything. And then sometimes they should really be thinking about a different term, and that distinction matters. So, examples, students will see the word random in the term random assignment and random selection,
Right.
and they'll use them interchangeably because somebody outside the class sure seems like, well, you just said random assignment, you just said random selection. I'm sure you're talking about the same thing, but we know that distinction is super important.
Yeah.
But then some other distinctions might not be so important. Like I remember students asking about social facilitation, and then we studied the Yerkes Dodson law, and there's a whole lot of overlap there, buckets of overlap there. And the student said, "Well, why do we have 2 things for that?" And the answer to that is slightly more nuanced. I mean, you use social facilitation when you're kinda talking about one aspect of the Yerkes-Dodson law, but you use Yerkes-Dodson when you're talking about kind of the whole range of how being in a group or arousal influences your behavior. So sometimes it's blatant, sometimes it's subtle. And I think I'm not sure I'll be able to come up with a term off the top of my head, but if any listeners are listening to this and you think there are two terms in the intro psych textbooks that completely overlap, that might be a fun discussion.
Oh, that you mean are just complete
Yeah,
synonyms?
complete synonyms.
Oh, I think there's probably, I mean, probably in the diagnostic,
Hmm.
I mean, we don't use neurotic anymore, for example. I mean, I think we do in a practical sense, but not in a diagnostic sense. I think neuroticism has been replaced. We don't use, I'm trying to think, multiple personality.
Yeah. Yeah.
There are more precise terms. I'm not a
Sure.
clinician, so I'm not going to be able to come up with them
No, yeah,
um,
and definitely
easily.
terms, yeah, dissociative identity disorder, and then,
Thank you.
one that's big in K-12 right now is we trained ourselves for a long time to talk about Asperger's syndrome, and now that has been replaced with, I believe, autism spectrum disorder. So
Right. And talk about a
at yeah,
spectrum.
terms that get replaced. Yeah, definitely, and that's important, and sometimes that happens for important ways. Perceptual adaptation and perceptual habituation? I'm not sure I ever really got the distinction between those 2 terms all that well.
Is that like related to dark adaptation and
Kinda, yeah, it's all in the sensation perception area, and I believe one is physiological and one is happens because of perceptual sets, I think. I'd have to look that up.
so I have to tell a story, sorry. So Sue France and I for a while, maybe 7 or 8 years ago, we had a lot of fun inviting intro psych textbook authors to conferences, either APA or WPA. I think we're a couple 2 or 3 times we did this. Different textbook authors from different publishers. We would have a panel of 4 or 5, and we would schedule like a 2-hour session, and it would just be kind of a Q and A because I think a lot of people in our industry are kinda curious about the mythical idea of writing a textbook, what it takes, so we had people like Dave Myers and Scott Lilienfeld, may he rest in peace, and, Susan Nolan, Nolan White, Greg Feist, Erica Rosenberg. I mean, we had just a whole host of different people at different conferences where they were going. It was a blast. It was a lot of fun. We probably should have
Cool.
recorded them. And, people were asking about, well, how do terms get into a book? And are terms ever taken out of a book? Kind of related to what we were talking about. And Scott Lilienfeld told this great story that I think Sue Franz and I have retold a number of different times. He was doing a revision with his co-authors on his book about, and they wanted to take out dark adaptation
Mm,
out of the, I think, sensation perception chapter. And, these textbooks usually have a dozen to 2 dozen reviewers. So, IntroPsych's a big business in the US. Between 1.2 and 1.6 million students buy a new book every year in the US. That's the general
wow.
estimate. It's a big business, and when you go to a bookstore and you look at the sticker price, it's not unusual to see 125 bucks. So you do the math on that, and
Wow.
so making decisions about what stays and what goes and how you decide, that's a big decision. So anyway, Scott was telling this story about how he was gonna take out dark adaptation, and I think he had, like, 20 reviewers, let's say, and 17 of them were fine with it.
Hmm.
It was like, no big deal, but 3 of them raised a stink and said, "How could you do this? I can't imagine an intro psych textbook without dark adaptation. It's just unconscionable." It's unimaginable. How could you do that? And that scared their publisher so badly that they said, "Scott, you gotta leave it in."
Wow.
And so you can imagine an intro psych book that has 2,000 terms stacked into 800 pages. Odds are, once you've written the first edition, you're probably never going to be able to take out any term because there's a little lobby or special interest group amongst your band of merry reviewers who are never going to allow you to take out random assignment. You can't take out random assignment in the research methods chapter. It's the stalwart, pillar of
Yeah.
that thing. So I had to share
Yeah,
that.
and I think there's an equivalent and maybe scarier thing that happens in K-12. I think it's probably a pretty common practice in K-12, when sometimes states buy textbooks for districts. In Nebraska, each district decides to buy their own, thank goodness. So our district, every once in a while, will bring teachers in to look at existing textbooks, and we'll have them evaluate that textbook. There's a whole bunch of things that go in that evaluation, but one of the things is we get out our standards and objectives, and some standards and objectives documents also go down to the level of terms that students should know and be able to use, and sometimes people that students should be familiar with. And that can be really useful for teachers. But it strikes me now that our curriculum documents are probably always at least a little bit out of date, kind of by necessity.
Sure.
If we're evaluating a brand new textbook using at least a slightly out of date curriculum document, we're going to have terms in there that maybe should be changed, maybe shouldn't be in a textbook, but we're going to ding the textbook if they don't include those terms.
Yeah, that textbook selection, as well as what goes into them, I believe is very political, small p, not Democrat, Republican, but
Mhm.
very political, social influence. I mean, it's the practices have gotten better, but in the 80s and 90s, maybe I hope it stopped in the late 90s. The textbook rep would visit a department like ours and take people out to dinner,
Yeah.
and we would get VCRs and laserdisc machines and new TVs that would go on top of carts. They could be wheeled into the room. There was I don't think there were direct cash payments to departments, but some people would be flown to conventions where there'd be focus groups.
Wow.
I mean, because if you're selling to the United States 1.6 million books that retail each for 125 bucks, and the standard profit on a hardcover intro psych book is 15%.
Hmm.
I mean, that's the standard profit margin. So there's cost, and the author gets their own cut outside of that. That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
So it's high risk, high reward business.
Yeah. So in the research methods section of every single one of those textbooks, the textbook authors probably make the argument that the way science advances is through empirical research and empirical data, and science changes based on the findings and the consensus of the community. But if that science gets represented in a textbook, the very textbook students are reading that in, sometimes science gets represented the way it does because you have to sell textbooks.
That is exactly right. Yeah. Science gets advanced by bits and spurts. It's not this nice, clean,
Yeah.
yeah. And sometimes science makes mistakes and it takes a
Mhm.
while to correct.
Yeah. Oh, classic mistakes, like, we haven't talked about the tongue map. So the tongue map and the sensation perception, it was part of the science for a long time, probably because of publishers who were afraid to leave the tongue map out of that chapter.
Right, because if you come out and say, "We're not gonna have that representation," some uninformed potential adopters are gonna go, "Where's my tongue map?
Yep.
Where is it?" "Well, it's actually inaccurate." "Well well,
Well,
show me
yeah,
that data," and a
right.
publisher's rep might not have that citation on the tip of their tongue. Sorry.
I was thinking of a movie title, "Dude, Where's My Tongue Map?"
"Dude, where's my homunculus?" I'm sorry, it took me a while to recall the term. Oh, what are you okay, so you have to describe for our
Oh,
listeners what you're
I'm
showing
holding
on
up
your screen.
I'm holding up a 3D printed homunculus so that, Eric can see it. This was printed by a friend of mine and sent to me. So if you don't, dear listener, if you don't have a homunculus on your desk, what are you doing?
Yeah, I would just go to homunculus.com or
Exactly.
homunculus.org and
Right.
order yours today.
Exactly.
14.99 plus shipping and handling. It'll be there in 4 to
Exactly.
6 weeks. Remember those days? It wasn't 2-day shipping, it was 4 to 6
Nope.
weeks.
Yep.
It's coming from Nyack, New York. I don't know
Yeah.
why. Yeah. Yeah, it's and so it's I don't think most students, in fact, I don't think most faculty understand really how science advances.
Mhm.
You
And
probably
then how textbooks relate to science advancing.
Yeah, and I think textbooks have a really huge role in that. And somebody did research once on the lag between, a faculty member having an idea, the faculty member conducting the study, the faculty member presenting it at a conference, the faculty member getting it published in a journal, the faculty member maybe even publishing it in a trade book, and then it occurring in a textbook. And someone showed the time sequence, the time lag, and cutting edge research in air quotes that gets into textbooks maybe was and by the time it's actually printed and in a student's hands or on a student's screen, it's probably 5 or 6 years old from the time the researcher actually did it. So
And golly gracious, imagine if that's what the lag is in college, imagine what it is in, K-12 schools.
well, I'm assuming at
Yeah.
least in AP Psych, you're using college level textbooks because it's a college level class.
Yeah, but the adoption cycles in high school aren't always what they should be.
Okay, fair enough.
Yep.
Yeah. But then again, do the basics of general psychology really change that
Yeah.
fast? And, I've also heard the argument, to be fair, that, maybe general psychology students don't need to have a book that has the 2021 citations.
Yeah.
Maybe they need to know from the beginning of psychology through 1950.
Yeah.
If they understood that basic core, maybe they need a history of psychology textbook and they don't need a general psychology or introductory psychology textbook.
I bet some of our friends might argue that some chapters of supposedly current intro psychology textbooks are more like a history of psychology textbook. I've heard folks talk about the developmental chapter, and I'm not enough of an expert to know for sure, but that the developmental chapter in most intro psych textbooks is more like a history of developmental psych than current developmental psych.
Yeah, I think we could find colleagues among us who say, "Why in the world are you teaching Piaget? Why in the
Mhm.
world are you teaching Freud?"
Yeah.
Other than the historical influence of both, honestly.
Mhm.
Um, are there really Piagetian scholars? I mean, I know there's a Piagetian society, but
Mhm.
is his framework really a huge influence in for developmental science right now? And the answer is I don't know. So
Yeah, I don't know either.
someone will be screaming at their speaker while they're listening to this podcast. So
Right. Yeah. So there's work for somebody to do in the relationship between the way textbooks are made, kind of the way the sausage is made, and what we talk about as the nature of science in the first chapter of those books.
yeah, and the good news is there are folks out there who do that type of research.
Good.
Regan and I have dabbled in it a little bit from time to time. There are folks who their research agenda oftentimes includes introductory psychology textbooks or psych textbooks more in general. I think like anything else, COVID has sidelined a lot of people's
Sure.
research productivity. I think the textbook area might be one of those places that could kind of continue in a pandemic condition.
Mhm.
If you have enough support and, if you have the bandwidth to do it, that might not be the kind of thing where you have to be face to face with subjects or participants. Sometimes we go off script and we don't follow the outline, do we, Rob?
And often there isn't an outline to follow,
Oh,
but
oh, we're being coy. There's never an outline to follow. Maybe a chat or a couple notes just
right.
shared on an email prior. But I thought maybe I could tempt you into sharing some self-care or coping tips that either you use or you've heard about, and I will share as well during pandemic times for teachers.
Yeah, you bet. Let's go little ones and then bigger ones.
Perfect.
Great. The little ones that work for me, since I'm lucky enough to live in Lincoln, Nebraska, and I only live a couple miles from my office, not hours. I only live a couple miles from my office. I bike to work as often as I can. And right now I'm teaching at a high school that's farther away in the morning. So I'll even go, this doesn't make environmental sense, and I apologize to the planet, but I drive out to this high school and then I drive back home, and then I get on my bicycle and I bike to my office. And I'm negating my green footprint, but it's working for me for self-care. I love teaching this high school class, but then getting back and getting on my bicycle and biking to my office helps me out a lot.
Oh, so your office is not at the high school where you
No,
are
sorry.
teaching.
My office where I'm in right now is at the public schools district office, which is a couple miles from my house.
So
But the high
it's an
school,
administration
it
building
is. It's an administration
that
building.
doesn't
Yep.
have any classrooms.
Nope.
Gotcha.
Nope.
Oh, okay. I was
Yep.
confused. I'm
So I
sorry.
teach in a different place where I have my office.
Okay. And are you teaching 5 days a week?
Yep. So every morning, 8 a.m. class out at the high school, North Star High School. And then I come back home when I can and get on my bicycle and I go to the Lincoln Public Schools district office.
And that's a self-care treat for you.
The bicycling part absolutely is. Now ask me in February when I'm slogging through the snow both places. I may have a different answer.
Will you put, like, chains on or special tires?
I'm not nearly as tough as a lot of my friends. There are people who bike all the way through the Nebraska winter, and I'm not one of them.
Will you add a motor? Give yourself a
Oh, goodness, no.
motor to
No.
a motorized bicycle? You know what I'm talking about.
Oh, absolutely, and electric bikes are cool, but I like my pedal bike.
How about a gas powered? Why go electric?
Ah, no, too noisy. Far too
Okay, that's
noisy.
what mufflers are for. Alright.
How
Uh,
about you?
and some of these might not even be COVID related tips, but just little teaching tips,
Hmm,
I think, to reduce stress related to either grading or
mhm.
dealing with students or dealing with student issues. And one of them I just think about that I started doing quite some time ago. I stopped promising when I was going to return graded assignments.
Smart.
So if I was getting an assignment from my capstone class this semester, it has 83 students. I meet face to face twice a week. And let's say they're handing in an infographic, I might tell them my goal is to get them back to you in 3 weeks. I don't say I will get them back to you in 3 weeks or I will get them back to you on October 14th. I just over time I've just learned to give a goal, and then if I don't meet that goal, I just apologize in class and say, I meant to get there. Just like for you, life happened for me, and I'll get them to you as soon as I can. I am as anxious to get them done as you are to receive them. So,
Yeah, that's smart. Instead of locking yourself in, leave yourself some flexibility because you know things are gonna happen.
because I used to lock myself in and I didn't want to break my promise. And I think those are the last times I spent all nighters,
Wow.
which would be grading all night.
Yikes.
That's not good because then
No,
you start looking for error. A cranky grader is not a fair grader. So
absolutely.
I think that's one of the self-care coping tips I would offer. Do you wanna go
That
try
makes
to go
sense.
back and forth?
Sure, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
And mine are apparently gonna be mundane. You're gonna have good teaching practice
Oh, I
ideas,
don't
but,
know about that. I that's
uh,
one.
I discovered this year the joys of AeroPress coffee. I have we have a coffee maker at home, and it's nice, but it makes a lot of coffee. I found and I didn't wanna buy an expensive espresso machine or anything to make a small amount. So if anybody is a coffee lover and you wanna try out the AeroPress coffee, I'm a big fan. It's just a little tiny device that looks like a plastic kind of a big plastic syringe, and very quickly you can make yourself a very decent small cup of coffee for not a whole lot of money, fast, easy. I can bring it to work. So AeroPress coffee maker.
So I'll offer one here in a minute.
By the way, we're not sponsored by AeroPress coffee maker. That was not a
Oh,
subsidized.
or maybe this is my tip. Why wouldn't you treat yourself to an espresso maker?
Yeah, it's a good point. I don't want to give up the counter space. I don't really want to plug anything else in. It's not just the cost, it's other things.
Okay, so you need a little table.
Yeah, did.
In your office, right? You don't give up
I
the
was
counter
thinking at
space.
home, boy, at office at and in the district office, we wouldn't be allowed to have
No, no, no,
that
in your
sort of thing.
office. The room I'm seeing right now.
Oh, this is my district office.
Right.
This is
You're not allowed to have
No. No plug-in heating things. We've had a district office burned down before here. So, we are very cautious
so
about anything that plugs
so
in and
no
makes
one
heat.
in that office in the winter has a space heater.
Nope. They were all gathered at when this so our old district office burned down a number of years ago, burned
Okay.
to the ground, and everybody lost everything. So in the new office, when the new building was built, it was very clear that there would be no space heaters, there's no personal coffee makers, there's no toasters, there's no nothing. You
Okay.
got a microwave
All right.
because it's not gonna start a fire.
All right. Well, first off, microwaves can start fires
Yeah,
if
it's
you
true.
put something
Yeah.
in there. And there's something called GFCIs, ground
Yes, that's true.
fault interrupters, that can
That would be
actually
good.
capture anything, but whatever.
That's good.
You're not
Yeah.
gonna break the rules. I respect that, sort of. So, um, and at home, I respect the fact, so first off, they make these really cool things that if you have the storage space under the counter, you can
Mhm.
open up a cabinet and
Mhm.
there's hardware that'll underneath the cabinet, you have your coffee maker setting, and there's a hinged thing that'll come up to your
Ooh,
and
cool.
then you can put it away, and it doesn't have to
Neat.
take it permanently.
Cool.
I talk to people a fair amount. I'm really good at spending other people's money, but I've talked to people over the course of my career who've said things like that and, who've worked really hard, who are really, I don't know about frugal, but they're careful. They're people
Mhm.
who pay their mortgage every month and they pay all
Mhm.
their bills and they deprive them of something that is not overly expensive, but would bring them joy, and
Yeah.
I don't know. My self-care tip to you would be if it would be really joyous, think about it,
Yeah. I buy that.
you know?
Yeah. And I've given that advice to other people too, but I should reflect on that advice for me.
Yeah, and if you're yeah, you should. Or send me a link and then watch what happens. I've done that too. Let's see, my own self-care tip or tip about teaching. Let's see, I'm trying to think. This is probably one I've gotten from Sue France, which is try to find all the software shortcuts that you can.
Mhm.
So I do like finding software programs that'll make my life easier, whether it's something like Evernote for note taking or
Mhm.
Snagit for capturing images, a Dropbox upgrade for making my life easier and storing things, even though Google Drive is supposed to do. Actually, I have a Google Drive upgrade too for more
Mhm.
storage on Google. Um, I I have a habit of paying for comfort and convenience.
Mhm.
I'm very privileged to be able to do that. So that's one of my self-care coping tips. I wanna make things easier so that when I'm ready to work, I'm not futzing with I ran out of disk space or I don't have the program to do that. I want things to work. When I put the car key in the ignition, I want it to turn over and start.
That's an awesome tip, and I will wholeheartedly re-endorse the mention. Boy, that is just a cool little
Right,
program.
TechSmith, yeah.
Yeah, that I resisted at first because I thought, "Oh, there's a built-in
Yeah,
screen
there's a
grab.
there's a
I already
clip
know
in
that
or
key
something, yeah.
combination, da, 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 da," but somebody showed me, and it is just a lifesaver, and it's nothing I guess it's kinda like the espresso maker. It's nothing that you need because 'cause you've got other ways to do it, but this is gonna do it better and faster, so I think Sue's advice is a good one there.
Yeah, and I think I just to piggyback on that, I think a lot of academics are frugal, and I get it. Generally speaking, academics feel like they're underpaid. They're certainly underpaid compared to business compatriots, or even if you start looking at things, at least at the college level, you look at psychology faculty compared to business faculty, accounting faculty, engineering
Mhm.
faculty. If you're at a public institution, don't ever go look that stuff up because it's going to bum you out the rest of the day.
Right.
But usually there's a free version of a program and then there's a paid version of a program.
Yeah.
And the free version comes with hassles and click-throughs and ads and distractions. And the paid version comes with niceties and gets rid of the ads, and it works faster because those other ones have built-in delay lags. They actually have built-in cycles to make you wait because they want you to actually pay for the speed. And so that would be another self-care coping tip, I would say pay the $15 annually or the $5 one-time fee. I have a program I use called oh my gosh, I'm not even gonna be able to what is it called? Display Fusion.
Oh, I don't know that one.
Display Fusion Pro, and it connects my 3 monitors that I'm looking at right
Oh,
now,
cool.
and it gives me a toolbar at the bottom of all 3, and it connects my mouse to all 3, which there are free programs that'll do, but
Mhm.
when I get to the edge of the 3rd one, my mouse, cursor will wrap around to the 1st one.
Yeah, fun.
So I don't have to scroll back to get back to the first one. I can just keep going. And again, a little thing that and I there's a button I can click at the top of each screen that automatically moves that screen to the next one. I don't have to
Wow.
click and drag. I can just click once and automatically. And again, it's about productivity, making my life easier. Again, one of those
Wow.
self-care kind of tips.
Now I'm gonna picture you getting all Minority Report in your office with
It's not with hands, but
that'd be cool.
it's with a trackball. Yeah, it's not with
Nice.
yeah, it's not with a mouse.
Wow. The free paid version thing plays out in K-12 systems sometimes. I'm on the committee in our district where if, a teacher or a school wants to use, we call them instructional technology tools, but they're really apps. It's just they're apps for computers and apps for mobile devices. So wants to use an app, but it requires storing student data, then they submit it to us so we can look at it. And often we report back really strange sounding advice like, but there's a free version of the paid version. We'd like you to use the paid version, and here's where to request the money for that. Because if there's a paid version, we're much more confident that company's serious.
Mhm.
They're going to be around for a while because they have a business model. And it gives us confidence they're actually going to pay attention to their own terms of service and data privacy agreements. And it gives us leverage in case something happens. And sometimes it's frustrating because a teacher or an administrator will say, well, there's a free version. I just want to use it right here. It's fine. It does the same thing. I don't need all the features of the paid version, but we'll ask them and try to help them find a little bit of money. Because, like you said, it's never much money
No.
to just use the paid version because it's better.
Yeah, your building might be able to buy, a
Yeah.
school might be able to buy a school building, for $100 and 40 teachers could use it, under that license. I think one of the things maybe we can offer to our listeners is ask.
Mhm.
If you see a program that's 39 bucks lifetime that comes with free upgrades lifetime, which happens a lot with these software vendors, ask, especially during COVID.
Mhm.
Because, for example, a lot of schools aren't spending money on travel. They had budgets for travel. They're not spending it now. They might be still spending money supporting conferences and conference registration fees, but they're not spending it on travel and hotels. So maybe they've got some money there. We've been really fortunate at Boise State. We have been able, in our department, be able to spend a great deal of money during the pandemic and continuing now for supporting faculty members who wanted a standing desk.
Yeah.
So just to have that health risk mitigated, we're
Yeah.
shipping them directly to home. If they want it in their office here at school, they can have it. If they want it at home, we'll direct ship to home and they can keep it there. When the pandemic's over, we don't want them to bring it back here. I mean, this is an investment in people and their
Yeah.
health. And so I think another self-care coping tip would be if you need something for work, ask for it. We've got webcams and headsets in stock in my department. When faculty members are ready to upgrade some videos or have a little bit better audio, we want to have things ready for them when they ask.
That's cool. I think a subtitle for the self-care episode could also be, "You don't think you need this, but you really ought to try it." And that's definitely true with standing desk. I got drug into it because I didn't think I need it. I've got a chair, I've got a desk, everything's fine. And then someone basically forced it on me, and now whenever I use it, I feel better. I still have to force myself to use it, and I don't use it as much as I should, but I notice whenever I use it, I feel better, and it's the same thing with Snagit. I didn't think I needed it because I knew how to take a screenshot, damn it, and I could edit that screenshot, but it just makes life better.
It that title reminds me a little bit of a country and western theme, a honky tonk. You don't think you need it, but you do. Yeah. I don't want to go down this rabbit hole too much, but
Sure.
I when the pandemic hit and March of 2020, I started working from home like everybody else did, right?
Mhm.
And so the
Yep.
very few steps I was getting in my life, I was getting
Right.
on campus, going to meetings, different buildings, walking around the department, seeing my friends, walking to and from classrooms. March 2020 comes, I'm at home, solid like most people. And I'd look at my watch, and at the end of the day, I'd have 283 steps, right?
Yeah.
You do that from May to August, it's not good,
Mhm.
right? And at the end of August, I have a pulmonary embolism. I have a blood clot. I don't wanna I've talked about it elsewhere if people wanna listen to that episode. The point being, a standing desk can help people
Mhm.
mitigate the risk of a blood clot. So, not only, Rob, when you're using that, is it good for you, but it's actually an investment by a department or a unit or a school that help people stay healthier.
Right.
And, it you know, I just did one this week for a colleague, and it's gonna be $1,000. We have to buy our desks through certain vendors. We can't buy them
Mhm.
through Office Max. It's gonna be
Mhm.
$1,000. It's gonna be direct shipped to her home, and that is much cheaper than
Yeah.
what my pulmonary embolism and 3 nights in the hospital, A, cost Boise State, and B, was my deductible.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to be coarse about that, but it's just ask for things that you need. Ask for ergonomic chairs.
Yeah.
Ask for what you need to do your job comfortably to be able to have good self-care.
Agreed. I've got another teaching one, but I don't know if I can describe it. If it doesn't seem like this description will do it, maybe I can just give you links and we can put them in the episode notes. I said before how I'm back in a classroom for the first time in 16 years. I'm teaching this AP research class at a wonderful Lincoln North Star High School, and I'm changed my organization, my pedagogical organization for how I get students materials. So my model used to be either Dropbox or Google Drive, or you could do this in Office 365. They all work just about the same way. I would have a folder for every unit. Within that folder, I would have specific lessons. So I would have a set of slides to teach um, experimental method. I would have a set of slides to teach survey method. And then within that same folder, along with the slides, I would have student assignments. Then I had it all nice and packaged in folders, digital folder organization. I dumped all of that. And with my AP research class, I have one set of slides that I call the endless slideshow. Everything's in the damn one set of slides. I happen to use Google Drive, but you could Google Slides, but you could do the same thing with anything else. And I just have breaks in there for weeks. So I've got something in there for week 1, week 2, week 3. So if I need to search, I just do a command F and I just get to the week that I want to search for. And all the slides for that week are in that one set. And then I give students, instead of individual assignments, they got what I'm calling a portfolio, but you could call it anything you want. It's one big long Google document, but again, you could do it with Word or whatever. And it's separated by weeks, and there's bookmarks on the first page so students can jump to the week when they need to get it. And I've got blank spots for tasks in weeks. So I'll get to a slide that says, okay, everybody go to week 7, task 3. Here's the question I want you to answer in week 7, task 3. And it's there. And that's it. I've got one set of slides. I've got one big ass set of slides, big ass long document, and that's where students do their work.
And for you, that has turned out to be a coping tip,
It has. I'm not tracking a lot of different kinds of documents and trying to keep them
and
organized.
they're all in one spot, and your
All in
students know
one
they're
place.
all in one spot.
Right. And now the students are gonna walk away. They will download and keep their portfolio, I'm calling it, but you can call it anything you wanted. They'll walk away with that. And if they have the slides, if they have that, they pretty much have the whole class.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. I think, Rob, related to that, I think and I don't I think sometimes faculty members have a hard time giving this gift to themselves, and that is you don't have to cover all the content that you think you do. I know for me, when I started out teaching, I said I was gonna cover 16 chapters. By golly, I'm gonna cover all 16 chapters. And if I'm 2 chapters behind on the last day, "Congratulations, I'm cramming 2 chapters in 50 minutes in the last day. You don't think I can? Watch me." Right? And I think as I got older, the older I got, the less I taught
Mm,
content-wise, and you take deeper dives into less content, and I
mhm.
would encourage our colleagues that to be more comfortable with that strategy if they choose to adopt it, and to cut themselves slack, give themselves grace and kindness, and not feel guilty. It's one of these things where in a general psych class and a cognitive psych, developmental psych, at the undergraduate level, if you don't get to a chapter or you don't get to a topic, the world will not stop spinning on its axis. There will be other chances to get to it. Undergraduate courses are not such that it's not a professional degree. It's not like if you skip a topic in nursing, a nursing course, someone might die.
Right,
If you skip a pre-pharmacy topic, a dosing error might cause a death.
right.
If you skip cognitive dissonance and social psych, first off, I know you're skipping a really cool thing to talk about, but no one's gonna die if
Right.
you don't get cover cognitive dissonance and social psych. So I think instructors just have to give themselves the self-care and the coping tip that if I fall behind, I don't have to cram it all in. And why make my students so crazy doing that too? Just leave it off. It's okay.
I totally agree. The it's not a joke, but what's often said about jazz is it's about what notes a musician chooses not to play. And I think it's mostly said disparagingly or they're trying to be funny, but something like that. But I think there's a similar thing that's for teachers. You and I have both been to presentations or talks by just wonderful, wonderful presenters, and someone will ask a question, and we'll know that person well enough to know, okay, this person can either go super deep or they can just answer the question in a clear way. And they are choosing I think the best teachers choose what to say based on the needs of the learner at that point in time. They don't feel the need to tell everybody everything they know all the time.
It would take too long.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, if I listen to Jane Hallinan or Regan
Yeah.
Gurung or Janae Hudson or
Uh-huh.
Steve Chu or Garth Neufeld answer a question at a conference, they'd get to the first question answer and they could suck up all the time
Yeah, yeah,
because they probably know more than the person asking it. So, and
absolutely.
most of the people in the audience.
Yeah,
So,
and it's the same thing with what we choose to spend our precious class time on. Um, Sometimes you're making the most important pedagogical choice is what you leave out.
yeah, I got a chance to give a talk about graduate school stuff, which I oftentimes talk about to some folks at Pacific Lutheran University, actually last Friday, which is why we didn't talk last Friday. And I planned it for, they invited me for an hour. I told them this talk, when I talk to students, this talk always goes longer than an hour, but here's what we'll do. I'll plan for 30, 35 minutes, and then we'll use the last 25 minutes for question and answers. But don't be surprised if we go longer because questions about graduate school are always interesting to students and they have more. So I actually stayed shockingly within 30. I think I finished 35 minutes with my slides and we went for another 55 minutes
Wow.
because you if you know your audience and you know your topic, you give them a little bit and then you answer their questions,
Yep, yep,
and that they're gonna come away with something hopefully that they needed.
yeah, absolutely. Those were good self-care tips.
Yeah, and I will bet that we have listeners that have more as well, and
Yeah.
so, yeah, I think, make your life easier and
Mhm,
enjoy a good cup of coffee, enjoy
mhm,
a delicious Diet Mountain Dew with ice,
mhm.
whatever it takes. Ride to school if that makes you feel
Yep.
better. Use apps that make your life easier or more enjoyable, or listen get yourself a good set of noise canceling headphones
Mhm.
that you can relax to if you're commuting on a train or, however you're getting to and from. Upgrade your car stereo to give you joy and relaxation on your commute.
Agreed. I bet our friends in human factors research would advise everybody to pay attention to what you do a lot, what the things that you have to do repeatedly, and then focus on those and figure out just how to make them just a little bit easier or more fun.
Yeah, you know, um, invest in a good bed where you're gonna get a good
Yeah.
night's sleep and upgrade your pillow, and
Yeah.
get yourself some sheets that make you feel luxurious. 'Cau
If you don't like your keyboard and you don't like your mouse, get a damn new keyboard and mouse.
Yeah,
You're gonna use them thousands of
and
times.
get your department to pay for it, and
Mhm.
for God's sake, stop using 1 computer screen. I have
Yeah,
3 in front of me,
yeah.
and it's not enough. If you think you have 2, it's like, "Oh my god, I can't believe it. I'm so blessed." Get 3, and then, you'll never go back. You'll never go back.
3 3 is the new 2. 2 is a new 1.
Yeah, and 3 is rough. 3 and you're gonna want 4. Actually, 3, I want 6. I want a stacked 3 with another 3 below it. Yeah.
Funny.
Yeah. Thank you, Rob. I
This was
appreciate it.
this is great. Thanks, Eric.
Alright.